Hey everyone, this is Bryant on the Big Dreams podcast. I'm here on February 26th, 2022. It is Black History Month. So glad to be here with a guest of mine, friend and fellow Columbia alum, Rico Roberts, here to talk about a number of things. Basically, what we do here on the Big Dreams podcast is we talk about people and ideas that I feel need to get out there. People who are an inspiration to me, people who have inspirational messages to share, people who have interesting stories. So with that, let's just dive into it. Rico, great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Bryant.
So, let's get to know you a little bit better.
Sure thing.
Where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
Sure. So I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, born and raised, and I spent most of my life in Brooklyn. Around the time for high school, I went away to private school. So I went to Loomis Chafee, which was a private school in Connecticut, and I went there from like 14 to 18, boarding school. And then from there, I stayed in the New England area. I went to undergrad at Tufts University. So that's where, my formative years were developed. So about 14 years in Brooklyn and then 8 years in the New England area going to school.
Well, that's great. Would you say that, where you grew up in Brooklyn, how did that kind of shape your life, your experiences? Was there something about growing up in Brooklyn at the time that you were there that impacted you as a person?
I would say that I definitely noticed the difference when I went to boarding school. So, when I was in, so elementary, middle school, junior high school, it was, a predominantly Black school in a predominantly Black neighborhood.
Right.
I would say middle income neighborhood, lower to middle income neighborhood. And then going to private school, it was a culture shock because it was 98, 97% white,
Wow.
and so I was one of, you know, a handful of people of color, in particular, a young Black man, and in a place where that was predominantly white. Most of the people who went to these schools they were affluent. So I went to school with the daughter of Regis Philbin.
Wow.
Yeah, and a lot of my classmates, they were sons and daughters of people in finance, financial services, private equity
Mm.
firms, um, and maybe, doctors. So by and large, people were well off, and that was a shock.
Yeah.
And then also, it was my first introduction in terms of what people thought of people of color. And, some people had, stereotypes in terms of where,
Hmm.
the neighborhood, how a Black person was supposed to act. And it it made for some interesting conversation and interesting moments of discovery in terms of who I was as a person and being able to relate to different peoples. But I think boarding school was my first entry point to different cultures.
Hmm. That's interesting. Not everyone gets that experience, I would say,
Yeah.
of going away to boarding school and private school. What was kind of the driver? Like what led you to led your parents, I guess, to sending
Yeah,
you to
well,
boarding school?
it was really just an opportunity to get a great education.
Yeah.
And I got a scholarship, and it was one of those opportunities. It was like a once in a lifetime opportunity that could, change that my parents felt could change my outcome or put me on the path towards quote unquote success. So it was one of those things where it was an opportunity that I don't think I could have turned down. because I guess I could have gone to a school in New York City, but
Right.
I don't know if I would have gotten exposure to the same opportunities and to the same networks if I stayed in New York. And but by the way, that's not to say that I wouldn't have ended up in the exact place that
Yes.
I am now,
Yeah.
but it was just, we our family viewed it as a unique opportunity
Yeah.
that could only enhance my chances for success.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, if you have an opportunity, you take it, you go for it.
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
I mean, let's dive into, you mentioned that the experience, the kind of maybe a culture shock,
Yeah,
when you got to your new boarding school.
yeah,
Tell me about that experience. As you said, you moved from an environment where you were used to, having maybe more diversity, a lot more, um, people who were, the same skin color, and
yeah.
then moving to private school where he said 97, 98%, white. Was there any tension? Was there any, were there any challenges you faced, as a
Well, I
kid
mean, it was
growing up?
just in terms of, and again, this might sound funny, but people there would wear LL Bean and J. Crew. They would
Hmm.
listen to Pink Floyd, Grateful Dead, Fleetwood
Right.
Mac, Led
Yep.
Zeppelin.
Yep.
So it was. So on one hand, it was great because I got exposure to music and culture that I otherwise probably wouldn't have been exposed to
Mm.
at an early age,
Right.
if I had stayed in New York. Before I went to boarding school, I never heard of the Grateful Dead.
Yeah.
I never heard of
Yeah.
Jerry Garcia. I never heard of Pink Floyd. I never heard of, I never saw movies like A Clockwork Orange. So I never had um, people who had little to no interaction with people of color. You know, so it was. I think it was informative, and it was also an educational experience for me. So not just in terms of dealing with, um, learning about, dealing with the academics, but also dealing culturally,
Yeah.
being away from home.
Right.
That took some adjusting.
That's
Being
tough
away
too.
from,
Yeah.
yeah,
At a young
especially
age.
at 14,
Yeah.
it was that took some adjusting, and then dealing with people who just had a different worldview than what I was accustomed to. Um, Living with and being used
Right.
to. And then of course there were also, dealing with stereotypes that I think people have of, black men and people of color, and some of it I think was out of ignorance, and then I think some of it was, there there were, you know people who were, how should I frame it? There were people
Yeah.
who had a different worldview,
Sure. Different point of
and
view.
a different point
Yeah.
of view. And it was interesting because I remember, if a person of color got into a great school,
Yeah.
the the assumption was that they benefited from affirmative action,
Sure.
not because they that
Not
they
that
were,
they earned it
not
themselves or
that they
on
quote
their
unquote
own
earned
merit,
it.
right?
Yeah, and
Mm.
at the same time, I distinctly remember someone who got into an Ivy League because of connections that his family had,
Sure. Yeah.
not because he was a great student.
Right.
So,
Happens all
and
the
I
time.
didn't. Yeah, it happens all the time, and it's kind of accepted, and
Hmm.
no one says anything about that. So things like that
Hmm.
that I started to notice, and what was interesting is that they would get upset if someone got into a great school. Not
Right.
all, but there are some people who would be frustrated at that. But they didn't say anything about the other person who, because of his or her connections, they got into a great school as well, but not necessarily because of their quote unquote merit, or not necessarily because they were a straight A student. And nothing was ever really said about that. And so it taught
Mm.
me that, it seems that there's a certain way that things get done, and it was, I used to wonder, well, why is that? Why is that because of the person's connections? Is because this person has money? And it was something
Mm.
that I think I noticed, but whenever it centered around race, that was kind of a touch point that people would focus on, and that was something that people would highlight a lot in terms of if when it came to people getting benefits and stuff like that, or people, or they would try to, some people, not all, would try to diminish your success based
Right.
on based on some policy versus this person deserves to be there.
Right.
So, and it wasn't, and to be fair, it wasn't all people who did that, but that was
Yeah.
something that was that was a tone or a trend that I noticed in terms of people would bring race up, or if there was a topic about a Black person, they
Yeah.
would look to the Black person as the quote unquote subject matter expert
Mm.
in that
Mm-hmm.
class, and
Right.
that wasn't necessarily the case. Like,
Right.
one Black man or one Black person shouldn't be the designated voice in a class, because
Of an
people were
entire of an
of an
entire
entire
culture, entire
of an
people,
entire
right?
culture.
Because
Yeah,
I mean, let's face it, we're all different. Like
yeah,
I would say it's not skin color that really like define like sure it's like it's a physical attribute, but it doesn't
yeah,
really define like say you can't really say, oh yeah, all Black people are like that, all Asian people are like
exactly,
that, right? Like
exactly.
you can't put us in a box.
Yeah, and to your point about, I also noticed that at school there was the myth about the model minority, and
Yes.
more often than
Oof.
not, that was
Yeah.
associated with Asian people. So
Yes.
there were this, and again, there were many wonderful people at boarding
Of course.
school,
Of
and
course.
people
Yeah.
who are progressive and open-minded, and who were, these days you would count them as allies.
Yeah.
And there were also people who weren't allies, and who had, and but there were also people who just had different viewpoints or different assumptions about people of color. And
Yeah.
whether they thought that you weren't smart enough, or they thought that, or they had, they would fetishize the men or women,
Sure.
in
In a
a
certain way. Yeah.
in a certain
Yeah.
way. So um it was really interesting, and it's so funny, because they have, with Instagram, they have these stories like Black at Loomis, or Black at
Mm.
Andover, Black
Hmm.
at Horace Mann, where it
Sure.
talks about the experience of, you know, Black men and Black women at these boarding schools. And it's interesting how much hasn't changed in terms of the challenges that people of color face at private schools.
Right. Right. Would you, you're a parent now as well,
Mhm,
so, you know, in thinking about, your experience,
mhm.
with going to boarding school here, would you, or have you, done the same for your own kids? Like, is this something you would recommend, for other, Black parents to
You
consider
know,
if they had the opportunity?
it's interesting because, I think about that because my daughters, they didn't go to boarding school,
Mm.
and they've had this adjustment period. They've had to have this adjustment period where they go from, primarily Black to a primarily white institution, and going
Hmm.
from New York City to, let's say, Vermont or upstate New
Sure.
York. And it's been, I think the culture shock has been interesting, to say the least.
Yeah.
With my son, my wife and I, we go back and forth because,
Yeah.
on one hand, I know people at some of these private schools who went through similar programs as I did, and now they're heads of schools at these programs. So I think,
Right. Right.
in
Right.
this day and age, I think people are more woke, and people are been, they have DEI committees
Hmm.
now, and
Yeah.
and
Yep.
and
That's
and
right.
they're really, and they're paying focus in terms of like the curriculum, um, sensitive, having conversations regarding race, making sure that students are treated fairly
Right.
when it comes to discipline, and and not looking at whether or not whether or not this child's parents have a lot of money to,
Right.
and and can shield them, from consequences if they act
Sure.
foolish.
Yeah.
I think, and the real tragedy of it is that I think a lot of it, this inflection point that the country touched upon, came with the death of George Floyd.
Mm,
And where
mm,
we saw a man get killed on live TV during COVID by a quote unquote officer of the law, and I think that became a rallying cry for many people around the world, and people, and at many of these schools. I think more and more people realize that stuff has to change, and I think it encouraged more people to kind of like share their stories that I think they otherwise kept to themselves.
yeah. That's yeah. You know, you threw a lot at me, Rico.
Yeah,
That definitely a lot. Definitely a lot. To think about there.
yeah,
And it's a complicated. It's a complicated answer. To my question.
yeah. And I
I
don't know
I
if
think.
I answered your question quite fully. I will say that I would love,
And it's not an
my
easy one to answer.
it's not an easy one.
Yeah.
So my daughters, like I said, they didn't go to private school.
Mm,
And by the way, private school is incredibly expensive too.
yes.
It
Yes.
rivals, I think, CVS.
Universe. Right. Yeah. Right. Allows. Yeah. Exactly. Private
you know,
universities like same tuition or
yeah,
maybe
yeah, it's
more.
the same tuition, and
Yeah.
some of these schools start at like kindergarten, and
Ugh, I mean, just yeah, shelling that out.
you know,
Oh my God, from K to 12 and
yeah,
then
from K to
college. Oh,
12, and then let's be honest, sometimes the kid is just painting color, like painting or coloring a notebook. Like I don't know if you need to pay all that just for him to do that. However, there is something, like one of the reasons why we went to business school is because of the network and because
yeah,
of the opportunities, and to be able to tap into that network. And there's something to be said about these institutions have a great network that can can be of use to the students who go there. But again, there's a lot. I think there's a lot to consider when when it comes to sending your child to private school. For me personally, I'd love for my son to have some public school exposure. I think that's a good balance before he goes to private school.
right.
If
Yeah.
that's the direction. And then also, I think my wife also went to private school as well, so we both
Mhm.
have a firsthand knowledge of what
What it's
that
like.
experience
Yeah.
of what it's like. So,
Yeah.
I think if that's the decision that we make, I think we would be hyper vigilant in terms of making sure that it's a place where he feels comfortable,
Right.
and that we like the curriculum, and that we feel comfortable about the the teachers who are going to be working with him and his classmates, and I feel like we would take steps to ensure that he has a great sense of who he is as a person, and he doesn't, because I think sometimes it's very easy to lose yourself in a place like that, particularly at a young age.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always interesting. I you know being a parent and deciding what kind of experiences you want
Yeah,
your child to have, because that's what I always feel that a person really is just the you know like kind of the sum, greater than the sum, but the sum
yeah,
of their experiences. Um, how you react to things is really based on things you've encountered in the past. um, and choosing a particular experience does influence them in a big way, how they think.
yeah,
um, yeah, I do like your answer and your thoughts here. I think to I've also thought about how, like, exposure to public school, like that being a good idea in general. um, because I guess sometimes when I think about public school versus private school, public school feels like a little bit closer to the real world, quote,
Yeah,
so to speak, right?
yeah,
Maybe a little bit more reflective of what life will be like once once a kid
yeah,
is out there, is grown up, right?
yeah,
Um, and sometimes, yeah, private school may offer a slightly, uh, maybe a little bit more, slightly more privileged or limited perspective on
yeah,
things.
yeah.
So yeah, that's an interesting perspective. One thing I was thinking as you were saying that is, regardless, it's always good to have people of color like more represented everywhere, right?
Absolutely.
So in spite of the challenges that you talked about in your own experience, the fact that you were there in that environment, and yes, like you you shouldn't be viewed as the sole window
Of
or
course not.
representation of Black culture for your classmates
Yeah,
at private school, but being there, being present, representing, you know is meaningful, for
yeah,
those who will come after you, and
yeah,
hopefully increase the amount of people who have those opportunities. I think it's more about the opportunity. It's less about like, the privilege or this or that.
yeah,
It's really
yeah.
about like opening up opportunity for people of color or disadvantaged people and anybody in a disadvantaged position.
Mm. And I went to my, geez, like what, 4 years, what years, or 6 years ago, 2016.
Yeah.
I went to, or 2017, I went to my 25th or my 20th reunion. I don't even remember. And, our 20th or 25th, yeah, reunion. And it was the first time I was back on campus. And
Hmm.
and it was really the first time that I had really reconnected with, outside of a few people, with the school. And what I realized is that when I set my foot on the campus, I realized that that school meant a lot to me, and it
Yeah.
did a lot,
Yeah.
and that, in the same way that there were some people that I, would love to forget, there were a lot of people that were very sweet and kind and did a
Yeah.
lot of wonderful families there. And so it, you know, that, you know, private school, is a part of who I am as a person,
Hmm.
and it did a lot for me. And was it perfect? No, by any stretch of the imagination. Was the experience perfect? No, but it still was an experience that shaped me as a person, and something that by and large was positive, even if at the time I don't think I truly appreciated what it did for me until afterwards, and then
Yeah.
I could look back on it. And
Right.
so it's I think when it comes to education, it's always going to be a challenging question to answer, because even if you go to public school, you want to send your child to the best public school that he or she can get into.
Right. Right.
So even
Yeah.
if it's not private
Exactly.
school, if you're in New York, you
Just
want to
want the
go,
best. Yeah. You want the
you want the
best
best. So
education that you can provide.
yeah, the best education
Of
they can.
course.
So that might be like Brooklyn Tech or Stuyvesant, Bronx High
Yep.
School of Science, Beacon.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Like you're gonna try to,
Exactly.
get your students. I mean, students,
Your
your
kids.
child into
Yeah.
your kids into one of those schools. Or LaGuardia or Point of Performing Arts. It's
Yep.
like whatever that is. So you want the best for your child, because you want them to have, a better opportunity set than you did
Yeah.
growing up. So
It's true.
it's challenging. At the same time, I think in this day and age, given everything that's happened, and given the power of social media, um, it's not enough just to go to school. You have to think about, well, what's the diversity like?
Yeah.
What is the diversity going to be represented in the teachers,
Yeah.
in the staff, in the curriculum, in the interaction with other students? It's like,
Right.
how, because is this a place where I would feel comfortable leaving my child there? And no matter if it's private school or public school, because the reality is, if it's public school, you're leaving your child there for like 8 hours a day minimum,
Oh yeah. Yep. Exactly.
and
Yeah.
then they're doing homework and they're interacting with the students.
It's their life. I mean, for
It's their life.
a good, like, the first 12, 18 years of a child's life. It's
Yeah,
school.
yeah.
It's
So
school.
it's impactful.
It really is. It really is. I really liked what you said there, around like looking at the diversity factor is so important, and how you get exposure to diversity. Because I think one of the big challenges that I think in today's like overconnected, hyper connected world is that, yes, we've been able to connect with people all over the world in such a great way, right?
Mm.
The way you and I can do so right now.
Yeah.
But then the unfortunate, side effect, I guess, is also that being able to choose, or maybe choose too much, what you get exposed to. Like
Mhm.
if there's a particular, let's say, belief you gravitate towards, then you can easily find yourself in a community of only like-minded individuals, and
Yeah.
you create an echo chamber of like, bouncing the same idea around and around, and then you form this bubble that prevents any new ideas or opposing points of view to come in, right?
Yeah.
And I think, that's where, a lot of people talk about where a lot of the divides in today's society are happening, because it's too easy to walk away from an opposing point of view. It's so hard to just have a open conversation with someone with a different point of view, because you could just turn around, go online, go on your phone, and find a community of, thousands, millions of other people who have the same, view that you do. So if you
Mhm.
don't have that exposure to different points of view, you're going to be more closed-minded and more likely to have those biases, I think.
Yeah. I also think that, um, particularly during the Trump years, I think one side effect of that is that opposing point of views have become radicalized. So
Mm,
it was one thing where you could have a, if I'm liberal and you're conservative, or if I'm conservative
yeah,
and you're liberal, we
yeah,
have different views and we could talk to each other. But now it seems that they're so radicalized and so either far left or far right that
yeah.
people don't even want to have the conversation,
Right.
much less hear, a different point of view. So it's a really, again, it's a really interesting time to be, we're living in very interesting times, because to have discourse with one another, it can be dangerous,
Yeah.
depending on who you
Yeah.
talk to, and and people will weaponize our differences, and to for their own personal and political gain, which is tragic, because that means that that they will weaponize the death of a man, or the death of a
Mm,
woman, of a person of color, and use that to further their own means, rather than trying to, um, this might sound very corny, but rather than trying to make the world a better place
yeah.
by better understanding one another, and understanding why people are in pain over certain things.
Yeah. It's a really good point. It's a really good point. Yeah. I was thinking as you were talking about that, the hyper, the polarization, right,
Yeah,
of viewpoints. It's I I I feel like it's always hardest to stand in the middle, you know.
yeah.
Um, like I was talking about before. Oh, do you hear a blender in the background? I just want to. Okay.
No,
Okay, good. I just want to do.
no.
I just want to do a sound check. I think somebody's blending something in the background. Making a smoothie. What's
Yeah,
going on back there?
exactly.
Just want to make sure you don't hear that. Okay, okay, good. Um, so what I was saying there was, I think it's always hardest to stand in the middle, like between the two opposing points of view. Like it's hard to drive that compromise. It's hard to stand in the middle and say, hey, actually, I think I can see, a little bit of both sides of view.
Yeah,
But then you're like, well, what do I do? Like let's say you're like, you're in, you know, you've got like let's say two different friends, with two very different points of view. You know, and you're like, hey, I wish they could just get along.
Yeah.
But like, how can I get them to see eye to eye? And you're standing in the middle and you're like, I don't want to get split in two by these two people with different points of view.
Yeah.
And actually, I surprisingly, I do think that most people actually do stand in the middle. It's just, in the media, it's easy to pick a side because it's
Yeah.
just so easy to explain, like, what do you stand for? Oh, this set of views or this set of values.
Yeah.
And then just focus on that. And like I was saying before, that echo chamber that
Yeah.
that kind of like, uh, accelerates that process. But actually, I do think most of us do stand in the middle and see a little bit of both sides, right? And want to find compromise, want to find common ground. But it's just so
Yeah.
hard to have that conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And I think standing in the middle is a great place to be because it allows you to talk and meet with different people and hear different points of view. And I,
Yeah.
and I think that's important. I think I remember someone told me that he said you should never have all black friends or all white friends. He said you should have black, white, Asian,
Yeah.
Puerto Rican, African, European,
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
He's like you should be able. He's like you want to be able to talk to different people and learn from them. And it's like if you limit yourself to just one, if you silo yourself, you're going to limit yourself and you're not going to learn as a person. So I think it's good to be able to meet and talk and interact with different people and be able to stand in the middle and that doesn't mean that you're going to agree with everything that he or she says, but to be able to like hear their voice and to hear their point of view and to be
Right.
able to um, that they can bounce ideas off of you. You can give them feedback. You can talk to them about, share your perspective. I think that's good, and I think that's becoming more of a lost art to be able to stand in the
It is.
middle, to be able to talk to people, to hear different perspectives without, and also to hear a perspective without casting judgment. I think
Yeah.
that's very hard. That's very hard to do, and not many people can do that. So, it's there's something to be said about being able to be able to kind of stay above the fray, if you will,
Yeah.
and while also, while also being principled and while also
Exactly.
having being able to stand up to injustice and be able to like share and be like, this is wrong and we have to make a change for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Really well said there.
Mhm.
I do want to shift topics slightly because
Sure.
I basically want to graduate from the point in your life where you were in public school, sorry, in private school, and
Yeah.
then you went to Tufts, and then you're starting your career,
Yeah.
as a young, well-educated Black man. Tell me about your early career, and
Yeah.
I do want to get into like where you are today. But let's start with the
Sure.
early career.
So the early career, I was in financial services. I
Hmm.
thought I was going to do investment banking.
Right.
I was a financial analyst for mutual funds, so
Hmm.
covering the mutual fund sector, learning PE ratios, and again, like I thought, well, not investment banking, then maybe I thought I would be a portfolio manager,
Right.
and this was around the time that the internet was starting to emerge, the World Wide Web,
Yep.
and I wanted to learn more about that.
Hmm.
So I made a shift and I started working in I guess, the digital advertising space. So
Hmm.
working for companies such as Discovery Channel,
Mm.
and this was when, you know, their interactive media was starting to emerge.
Right.
So, there were before it was just static display ads on a company's own, let's say Discovery Channel's website or TLC website.
Right.
And then as the advertising got more sophisticated, they would incorporate video within the ads, and then there was this shift from display ads to, well, TV.
Right.
So there was a shift that I was in Discovery with their digital advertising unit, And then I shifted to Comcast, where Comcast would focus on TV, and they define TV not just as the flat screen in your living room, but also your computer, your phone, your laptop, your iPad, any screen could be counted as TV. And with TV and advertising, that made for a really interesting um, place to be in terms of like how do we look at advertising? How do we look at digital media? Um, how can we grow that space? So I spent 12, 10 years or so there.
Yeah.
And it was while I was in digital advertising that so I think I was maybe 15 or 15 or 20 years removed from school,
Right.
from undergrad. And then I
Yeah.
decided to go back to business school and
Mhm.
like a crazy person. And, and but I was at a point in my life where it didn't make sense to go to school full time
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
kind of like interrupt my career,
Yeah.
stuff like that. So I was looking at either part time or embark programs, and I landed on Columbia. And it was at Columbia that got to meet great people like you, but also Columbia was a shock because I hadn't been in school for a very long time. So,
Right.
and I didn't know, there was just I went to business school because I wanted to pick up certain skills. I wanted to get better at like the core competencies when it came to finance and strategy. And so I didn't know about accounting. I didn't know about corporate finance. I didn't know about financial models. I really didn't know Excel, to be honest. I never really had to use it. So business school was kind of a shock to me and it was compounded by the fact that I was also working at the
Right.
same time.
Yes.
So
Yep.
there was
Oof,
definitely a
that was
period of
tough.
yeah, it was tough, and there was definitely a period of burnout because I'd go to work and then I'd have to do homework, and I didn't know Excel, and I don't know what's accounting, and you know, and, and our accounting professor wants us to do what? What's an income sheet? What's a balance sheet? What's an income statement? What's a income statement? What's a balance sheet?
Yeah.
Like, what are you guys saying to me? I have to know the
Yep.
model, and the funny thing about as you know, Brian, about business school is that you're always paired with the person who went to Goldman Sachs
Oh, yep.
or
Yeah.
Morgan Stanley, so they have the
Yep. Yep.
financial modeling down, but they can't help you on the test. So you
No.
have to do the homework. You have to do
That's
it.
right. That's right. Yeah, I know. And we had a lot of group projects. So yeah, I know what
Yeah,
you. Yeah, group projects. Oh yeah, we're fine. Yeah, we'll split it up. The person who like, is
exactly,
the accountant or the auditor, right? They
exactly.
can do that. And you're like, oh, I can't do this by myself. On the
Yeah.
test. That's fun. But so Rico, well, I know your career shifted into the digital advertising tech space, but
Yeah.
you said you started out thinking you were going to financial as a financial analyst in banking, but you didn't feel like back then like that there was a lot of like finance or accounting, um,
No.
as
Well,
much finance and accounting knowledge needed
so
for that.
yeah. Well, so when I started in as a financial analyst,
Yeah.
I was, it was for the asset management,
Okay.
and I
Yeah.
and so I learned about the PE ratios, and
A lot on the
making
job.
recommendations.
A lot
Yeah,
of learning on the job. Right. Right.
while learning on that, and making recommendations
Practical.
as to
Yeah. Practical knowledge.
making recommendations as to okay,
Yep.
you want to
Yep.
invest in this mutual fund because of XYZ, because of the PE ratio, the funds, the
Yes.
diversification, and the strategy.
Yep.
But I read a book called Liar's Poker,
Hmm.
and there's a difference between the sell side and the buy side when it came
Yes.
to financial services.
Yeah.
And I thought that I was going to, prior to reading Liar's Poker, I thought I was going to do investment banking. And then
Yeah.
I read Liar's Poker. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
investment banking isn't for me. I'm not trying to do 80 hours and 80 to 100 hours. I didn't think that was for me. So so I actually thought I was going to do, financial analyst and equity research and,
Okay.
kind of go
Yeah.
down that, that's a very different path. And
It
that could
is.
lead
It
to,
is. Yep.
either asset management, portfolio management, stuff like that. So, but again, I shifted because I was really fascinated about the, digital advertising and tech, and I knew nothing about it.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make a website, and I wanted to learn how do you
Yeah.
build a website? Okay, I'll do this. And a friend of mine from college, he got me, a buddy of mine who worked at Discovery. He was able to put in a good word for me, and I got an interview with the company. And then
That's great.
I got my first opportunity to kind of learn on the job
Yeah.
about, kind of more from like a digital and tech perspective. So yeah, so that's really how I shifted from, kind of my cutting my teeth in, as a financial analyst for
Right.
the mutual fund industry, and then kind of shifting into this digital ad tech role. And while I was in digital ad tech,
Right.
I really didn't have to learn about, anything about finance. I really didn't need, and I really
Yeah.
didn't have to use Excel. So,
Right. Right.
but it was like, it
It's
was those
different.
skills. Yeah, it was skills.
Yeah.
But I noticed that I would talk to people who went to business school, and I was like, oh, they had to learn accounting and strategy
Yeah.
and operations and
Right.
finance and economics. And I was like, those are good skills to
Those are,
have.
yeah.
And it was like, those are hard skills that I felt like I needed to
Right.
have, and just to, not that I've used any of these skills post graduation really, but it was,
Well,
but
the foundation, like it,
yeah, it
that
was like those
foundational
foundational,
knowledge, right? It's
yeah, it was foundational knowledge so
you
that
know
you
enough to be
can.
dangerous.
I know enough to be dangerous, and I know, and I know enough to, like, okay, well, that doesn't make sense, and I could,
Right.
I may not be able to, you know, build the model, or it would take me a while to build the model, but it's like I can ask the right questions because I've been trained. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
and the funny thing about the funny thing about CBS was that, like, I struggled my first with the core classes. I was like, what am I doing here? It's like,
I
this
mean,
is
like you said, it was like, you're 15 to 20 years out of undergrad.
yeah.
It's been
So
a
I was like,
while. It's been a
yeah,
minute.
it's been a while. So, yeah, it's been a minute. And the funny thing was that, somehow I got through accounting, and somehow I got through corporate
You did
finance.
it. You did
I
it.
did it. But the funny thing was that I had said to myself, I was like, because you remember that some people just stop after corporate finance. They're like, okay, I'm
Oh
never
yeah,
taking
yeah.
another finance
No
course.
more.
I'm
Yeah,
never
because
taking.
you don't have to. Yeah, you don't
Yeah,
have to
because you
take
don't have to.
anymore.
I thought that was going to be me,
Uh
but
huh.
the thing is that I wanted to take value investing because, Columbia is known
Hmm.
for value investing.
Yes.
But in order to take value investing, you have to take capital markets. So it's like,
So you were stuck. You're like, oh, I want to take this course, but
yeah.
I got to take this
So,
other prereq.
yeah, I didn't take like capital markets is like the entryway into all the other
It
finance
is.
courses,
Yep. Yep.
and like
Yep.
you have to take it. So I was like, damn, I have to take I have to take more. Like, it started to turn with corporate finance, but it was, capital markets with Professor Zurich. He
Yes.
was able to. I saw, well, this is really interesting stuff. So I went from planning to never take another finance
Right.
course after corporate finance to then I took capital markets, I took value investing, I took financial statement analysis, I took mergers and
Mm.
acquisitions.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
and then I took entrepreneurial finance with then Dean Hubbard. So it
Yes.
was like I really got deep into finance more than I thought I ever would. And and that says something about going to business school,
Yeah.
because I found that it pushed me in ways that I never thought that I would have done.
Exactly.
And the beauty about business school was that, especially the entrepreneurial finance class, was that that's where I started learning about startups and venture capital and investing and how startups work. And that's where that really started to pique my interest about that ecosystem.
Yeah. So many things that I want to respond to and what you just said,
Yeah,
because there's a
please.
lot of great messages, in your story there,
Yeah.
like uh, that I think one thing that's inspiring to me, is that you have that intellectual curiosity, and like you have kind of it feels like you have no fear in pivoting, shifting, a couple of
Yeah.
different times, but they end up being smart bets. You
Yeah.
shifted from finance into the burgeoning, digital ad tech space, really,
Yeah.
at a really, really early time. And, not that long after, I guess you were working, there was the financial crisis. So, investment
Yeah.
banking might not have been the right move there. And look at
Yeah.
where digital, is right now. Like, ad tech, like it's all hot, so you
Yeah.
ended up positioning yourself really, really well. Your instincts led you in the right way. Uh,
Yeah.
I thought it was funny that you did find yourself, though, back at Columbia, back in finance, after
It's I
or
laugh at
taking finance
myself.
classes. Yeah.
No, seriously, it's funny because Brian, when I tell you that I struggled with the core classes, I let's just leave it like that. I struggled. I was like, from the accounting to the statistics to all of it. It
Yeah. Yeah.
was
Yeah.
just like, what am I doing here? And and again, it's compounded on the fact that I was working.
Yes. Yeah.
Working at the same time,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
it
Your
and it
attention's
was like,
divided.
yeah, and like, and again, it's like stuff like I didn't know Excel. It was like I really was like starting from the ground up, and I had to learn like the basics of Excel. And I'll
Yeah.
tell you a funny story. Like after business school, I took a financial modeling and Excel course because not that I was going to do financial modeling, but I wanted to become more familiar with the space,
Right.
just to like I have like a foundational knowledge, and then I wanted to get better, more comfortable with Excel. So it's like I taught myself like the shortcuts
Yeah.
and to better, but just become more familiar
Yeah.
with Excel. And again, it's not like I use Excel every day or do I
But you
bust out a
can.
model,
Sure.
but I
You
can't.
can.
But
Yeah.
or like to get up to speed, it won't take that much. It won't take as long
Totally.
as it did in business school. So it was. I realized the importance of those courses, even if
Right.
you don't. Even though I'm not, it's not like I'm starting a hedge fund or anything
Yeah.
like that, but it's like, but being able to like have that knowledge base so that you could use it and just ask the right questions. So
Yeah.
I really enjoyed my time at Columbia because it pushed me to do things that I didn't think that it pushed me, it forced me to get out of my comfort zone and really evaluate my blind spots
Right.
try to do what I can to get better at them, to enhance, to eliminate them or or reduce them at the very least.
So much of what you said just now, about this, your business, the experience of going back to business school, going to Columbia, like it really, I think, is a reflection of the conversation we just had about how important it is to get a diversity of experiences. Because going to CBS, your your classmates are and have come from very, very different backgrounds,
Yeah.
in all respects. I mean, career is one aspect, like you said, you're working with some people who are, finance, some people who are, engineers, some people who are designers,
Doctors.
doctors, yeah, surgeons, right? Right?
Yeah, surgeons.
That those
Exactly.
guys are, yeah, those are guys impressive.
Yeah.
Um, and like, I also felt the same way, I also felt like this is such a great community, like to meet so many people doing very different things from me. That
Yeah.
inspired me a lot,
Yeah.
and you know, like I think it's the same. It's that ecosystem, that was present at Columbia. Like we need more of that, outside exposure, in the other areas of our life. You know, if people could be exposed to more people with different backgrounds and different experiences, we'd all be better off. And
Yeah.
and it's kind of led you to the point of, um, where like now you're kind of back in finance in a way, as
Yeah.
from an investor standpoint,
Yeah.
like you studied, like you said, entrepreneurial finance, and now you're doing some more entrepreneurial things now, which I wanted to talk about,
Yeah.
your how you went into entrepreneurship after Columbia.
Yeah. So at Columbia, I was just curious about venture capital.
Yeah.
and startups, and VC is one of those sexy terms that you hear, and I don't think people know what it is, and I certainly didn't. But I just knew that, okay, venture capital, working with startups, I think you can make some decent money, and meet some cool people, and I don't know and Silicon Valley and
Works for
Silicon
me.
Alley. That sounds
Yeah.
great. So I I worked briefly for a startup. Um, that I had found through Columbia Business School.
Mhm.
It was a fintech that was founded by actually a CBS alum, and I worked briefly there, and I learned about fintech, and I was like, well, this is really interesting. This is really
Yeah.
great. I want to, I'd love to learn more about that. And then I spoke to one of the executives in residence, and I
Mhm.
was telling them, well, I was like, I have all this diverse experience, and now I'm trying to marry it with entrepreneurship and venture capital. What
Yeah.
you suggest? The EIR, the executive in residence, had suggested a kind of like an apprenticeship program in San Francisco that taught about venture capital.
Right.
So I took part in that program, and a couple years ago, I was in San Francisco for a little while, and I was living in San Francisco, and I was learning about venture capitalism,
Right.
the venture capital ecosystem, and also learning, meeting with entrepreneurs, kind of learning soup to nuts the business of what it meant to be a VC in terms of
Yeah.
deal sourcing, presenting your deal to the partners, getting feedback on said deals, getting rejected, dealing with other investors and their point of view, sitting on the IC, presenting with, or the investment committee, presenting to the investment committee, and really learning of what entrepreneurs went through, like the challenges of running a business, and
Yeah.
that having your own business, and running a startup, and again, I think sometimes people have, they hear startups, and it sounds sexy, and
Mm.
and 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 I think it sounds sexy because they think IPO, and
Mhm.
it's going to
Mhm.
be the next Twitter, it's going to be the next, Facebook, and you're going to make $1 billion, but what they don't tell
Yeah.
you is that it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to when people on your team aren't when you and people on your team aren't on the same page, or it's hard when you're the CEO and you're trying to chase revenue because you have investors who are looking for you to perform, and there are milestones that you're trying to hit, but you reach out to clients, or you reach out to prospective clients, and they haven't gotten back in touch with you, and just the challenges that come with you know with being in a startup, and this is why I what I liked about Founder Tribes was that it was a way to address one, diversity in the
Yeah.
startup ecosystem, and then also education. It's you and I, we were pretty fortunate to go to business school, but not a lot of
Right.
people can do that.
That's right.
It's expensive for one, and two, it's hard to get into. So not a lot of people have access to that type of network and education, but they still want to be entrepreneurs, and they
That's right.
still and by the way, even though I went to these great schools, it was still hard for me to get into it. It wasn't like I could walk up and get a job in venture capital.
Yeah.
It's a
That's right.
hard
Yeah.
and closed network to break into. Even with going to decent schools, and that ecosystem is closed
Yeah.
for, and so that was one of the things that I noticed, and it was predominantly white men who were in that ecosystem. So
That's right.
I didn't see many people of color. I didn't see many women in the VC space, but
Right.
it was um but I was like, why is that? And much less when these investors would invest in companies, they tended to invest in companies of people that looked like them.
Yeah.
So
Right. Right.
and
Yeah.
and what I- and talking to the CEO of FounderTribes, he mentioned, and you spoke to
Yeah.
Gary Stewart. He mentioned that a lot of times, given his pedigree, you would think that all these doors would open, but he finds that he still has to prove himself or prove his business, and that people ask him questions and questions of what, well, how are you going to grow? Have you not? What's your traction? They want to see proof or
Right.
evidence that you're going to be successful.
Right.
But other people with other startups who who are white, the onus
There's
isn't on
less.
them.
Yeah.
There's
There's
less of an onus to that they have to prove themselves. They just say something, or they're connected and they have access to money,
right.
which is frustrating.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, speaking back to, what we talked about like way earlier in the conversation about, you know, certain types of privilege, that
Yeah.
exist, or, being able to get opportunities, maybe not solely based off of merit.
Yeah.
Not that it shouldn't be,
Yeah.
but like you're saying, in the example of, with FounderTribes founder Gary Stewart, he had an amazing track record already, you
Yeah.
know, and probably if to be frank, if he was white, there might have been, as you're saying, way less questions about his
Yeah.
credibility, and therefore his ability to start FounderTribes,
Mhm.
which we should talk about. The mission of FounderTribes, which I find so like fascinating and inspiring in and of itself. So my understanding of FounderTribes is, you're developing this platform that is, building a community of mentors and future startup founders, future entrepreneurs who are trying to build their business, but
Yeah.
maybe don't know where to start, and
Yeah.
like you're saying, don't have fancy degrees from business school and whatnot, but they have the vision, they have the talent, they just need the opportunity,
Yeah.
and probably maybe a little bit of capital helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's really about sharing that knowledge. Could you talk a little bit more about FounderTribes and
Yeah.
what you're doing there?
Yeah. The mission is exactly as you said. There are people that want to be entrepreneurs, and they might not look like your quote unquote typical entrepreneur. So they're
Yeah,
not white, they're not male,
yeah,
and they didn't go to Columbia or HBS or Stanford, but they want to be entrepreneurs, but they don't have access to the education or the networks that are needed to get access to the the mentorship, the capital, the other entrepreneurs. What Founder Tribes does is that we're trying to open up these networks so that we can have more entrepreneurs, a more diverse
yes,
ecosystem when it comes to entrepreneurship. So it's really, and we're using machine learning and fancy stuff like machine learning and AI, so that what it does with the platform, we had our beta launch about, I want to say, 2 weeks ago, which coincided with our webinar on entrepreneurship. What it does is that basically you upload a pitch, and it's evaluated using Sequoia's 10 points of the business plan, so
hmm
Sequoia Capital,
right,
the VC firm. And basically, if it's an investable business, you're going to be paired with investors who want to invest in your vertical along with mentors. If it's not investable at that point, it's you're going to be given some education, in terms of
so,
videos
right,
and
and
whatnot,
coaching and other
and
things. Yeah,
coaching
yeah,
and mentorships, and then you're
right,
going to be connected with other entrepreneurs so that you can kind of build yourself and your business up. And then once your business is reevaluated, then you'll be connected with investors who are looking to invest in your business. And the beauty behind that is that what resonates is that it's an opportunity to kind of like disrupt the entrepreneurship ecosystem, and
right,
just have more people of color, have more women um, entrepreneurs, and then also kind of give that, kind of one thing that resonates with me is that not all businesses are going to be unicorns. That's just, that's the
that's right.
reality of, so not everyone is going to be the next Twitter or Reddit or
They don't have
Facebook
to be.
now Meta,
Yeah,
and they don't have to be. they don't have to be, but they can still be successful. And
Absolutely.
and if you have an exit of $10 million or $20 million, that's still a win. That's
That's
still a
great.
win.
I'd
Yeah,
take
that's
that.
great.
I
Yeah,
wish I could
yeah,
take that.
yeah. A lot of people take, and uh you can impact a vertical in
Yeah.
your own way, and you could change the fortunes of your family, other people's family. You can be in contact, you can get connected with other business and ventures. So it's a wonderful opportunity, and you can get to know the angel investing ecosystem, and so it's a really interesting um, premise and opportunity that I think is here with Founder Tribes to kind of like disrupt this ecosystem. I actually came on board Founder Tribes as an angel investor
Hmm.
initially. So I believed in the vision, and then an opportunity came on board to like work with them and kind of like help out with like some of
Get a
the
little bit
business
more
development.
involved
Yeah,
in
get
the
a little
actual
bit more involved.
operations. Yeah.
Yeah, in the
Help
operations
push it
and
forward.
with and with some helping out with investor relations and some business development stuff. And
Yeah.
I think the beauty of working with a startup is, especially kind of like an early stage startup, is that I get to from the ground up kind of like see everything and kind of like participate and kind of like really you know try to make my mark in different areas, because you could I think the beauty of working with a startup is that you may come in for one specific role, but there's just so much fertile ground that you can end up doing several different roles by the time you're done. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. I'm looking at the site on my phone, and I know you guys are on the App Store and
Hmm.
Google Play, and I see that there is like value for all the players in the startup ecosystem. Whether you're a
Yeah,
founder and you're looking for that mentorship, or you're a mentor and you're looking to share what you know, or
yeah,
also kind of just the motivation of I want to cultivate like an idea that help someone cultivate an idea that you believe in, that you really
yeah,
support, just like you did when you actually joined Founder Tribes. You believed in
yeah,
the mission and said, hey, I want to help out, how can I help?
yeah,
um, and then also like you're connecting potential other angel investors or VCs who would be interested, in saying like, hey, like this is a great idea. These are
mhm,
here's some like niche ideas. And like you were saying before, in disrupting the ecosystem and having more diversity, in the pool. I mean, to me, that's like the whole reason why America like works in a way. I know works can be a saying that you America works can be tough to justify at times,
yeah,
but like the the power of like why so much innovation and creativity and a lot of like new technology comes out of America is in my opinion because we've brought together the diversity of the world, or
yeah,
we're trying to bring together the diversity of the world in one country, uh, and it's by having all this diversity that you get the best ideas. And so I really love what you're trying to do here within the startup ecosystem, is like, hey, let's bring in those ideas that maybe haven't been heard as much as they should have. Like, let's bring in
yeah,
the people of color, bring in the gender diversity, um, so that we can get some new ideas,
yeah,
that are probably really needed. And a
yeah,
lot of those ideas, they benefit society as a whole. Like, these are, whether it's a new service or a new technology, like these are things that will benefit everyone if we get these ideas out there.
yeah, yeah, and kind of having, unfortunately, to bring it back to George Floyd, I think
Yeah.
around that time of was it the summer of 2020,
Hmm.
you had more people who were starting to reach out to me and say,
Yeah.
hey, how can I help? uh, they were
Yeah.
starting to reckon with the fact that there is such a thing as privilege, and there is such a thing as doors that they had maybe taken for granted weren't open to everyone, and having that realization and starting to have these conversations. um I think it's it's very real. And I also think that having someone take a look when, you know, at your startup at a given time, like the CEO, like we all use Calendly,
Yeah.
and that's, that's found by a person of color.
Hmm.
But I don't think he would have gotten that opportunity unless someone decided to take a look,
Right.
So
Right.
it's really, and once they took a look at this business, like, oh, it's great, and now it's, I believe it's on its way to being a unicorn. There's a
Yeah.
startup called Isusu.
Mhm.
That was one of the companies that I had helped introduce, that, when I was doing my apprenticeship in VC. They help, um, like, basically, if you pay your rent on time, it you can improve your credit history,
Right. Right.
and it's found by people of color, and again, there's a helping, allowing people to improve their credit history, their credit
Right.
score, by paying their rent.
Yeah.
At the time, when this is a funny story, when I introduced it to the VCs that I was working with, they had passed on it. It
Mm,
wasn't something that they were into for whatever reason.
right.
Now this company, I think it got like $130 million investment from SoftBank, and I think it's on its way to being a unicorn, if it's not a unicorn already.
Amazing.
You know,
It's
and
amazing.
so I say all that to say is that there are great companies that are being founded or led by people of color, that so many of us, we don't know about, or we don't hear about, and we're not, and much worse, we're not given the time of day to.
Right.
And these companies, I'm not saying that you have to invest in every company, or that if it's a bad company that you have to invest in it, but
Right. Right.
we
Of
need
course.
to, yeah, yeah, I'm not,
Yeah. Do your due
it's not,
diligence. I mean,
do
yeah.
your due diligence.
Yeah.
It's not a charity, but there are great companies that we need
Yes.
to take a look at,
Right.
and give them the time of day, because these companies can be disruptive, and they can make you money, and they can also change a person's life. They can change how we do things in the world. So it's worth taking a look at, and worth expanding, your perspective with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Really well said. And I I I think there's another important aspect here that you mentioned, which is you know somebody had to give these businesses of founders of color that opportunity, a chance, like a willingness to
Yeah.
listen and say, I'll take a chance on you.
Mhm.
And you yourself like have gone and done the same when you got into angel investing yourself. um, I'm a little curious about that. Like, how did you decide to get into angel investing? How does somebody get into that? How does someone start doing that? Because when I think of these angel investors, I think like, oh man, look at these people who've got a lot of money, and they're just looking for things to invest in or buy this or
you
that.
know
So I'm curious
uh,
about your perspective, as a natural angel.
uh
How'd you get into that? And what does it mean? What does it
it's
mean to be an
funny.
angel investor?
So an angel investor is someone who invests his or her own money in a
Mhm.
company, and it's it's funny because a lot of this came through. So my wife works in private equity, and we would get people would just approach us about, like, either a family member, they had started a business, and you might have some extra money, so you invest in a company, and and then you have some friends, either from business school
Sure.
or from my wife's business school. They're, in your network, you hear people are starting their own business,
Yeah.
and you start, it really, you start looking at their business, and you ask questions, and they send you a deck, and you start investing, and
You say,
we
okay, this sounds good. Maybe I'll
yeah,
I'll,
this
I'll
sounds
chip in.
good.
I'll chip
Yeah,
in.
I'll chip
Yeah.
in. Exactly. It's and from the perspective of the startup, this is called bootstrapping. You're going
Yeah.
to family and friends and
Right.
angels before, because you're not quite at
You're not
you're not
ready
quite
yet.
at the point. You're not ready for institutional capital. So
Right.
what you do is is that you bootstrap, you use some of your own financing, your own personal financing, but you also talk to quote unquote angel investors who can invest in your business. So that's how, I mean, I wish there was, that's really the origin story, is that we started
Right.
hearing about these opportunities and learning about these different businesses, and we had some extra, we had some extra money at the time, so we were able to start investing
Right.
in a couple companies, and that's really how I started with the investing. It's just hearing some opportunities that came before us, and we decided that we wanted to invest in some of these companies because we really like the vision, we like the owner, the founder of the company. So, and we thought it would be um, a great way to like support, support something that we believed in.
Right. Right. And my understanding of angel investing is that there's not like, you're not at this point where you're like expecting, or putting pressure on the founders to say like, hey, you got to give me this return, or you got to pay
Yeah,
me back by this amount of time, right? there's
yeah,
not there's
yeah.
not that same pressure, right?
Yeah.
You're
I
putting on
think
them.
that's, yeah. You're, because again, it's your own capital for
Yeah.
one. So I don't, and I think, at least with me, it's like I go into it with the expectation that, okay, if we get something, that's great, but chances are I'm probably not going to get something because because reality is that a lot of, what, 90+% of startups fail.
Mm,
So, and but I don't think there's pressure, as much pressure, because we're not institutional
yeah.
capital. If
Right.
we were VCs and we had to
Sure.
answer to LPs and
Yeah.
and other GPs and
Yep.
all that stuff,
It
then
gets
it would
complicated.
be it gets
Yeah.
complicated, and then it gets stressful because you have people that you have to pay back,
Yeah.
and there are people who are looking for a sizable return on their investment. So then then I think you look at companies through a very different lens when
Right.
when against that backdrop.
Right. Right. Yeah. And in some ways, that pressure can stifle the innovation and creativity you want in a
Yeah.
burgeoning startup. If you're just worried about paying the bills and not actually focused on making your idea better and making your business better, it kind of ends up working against you. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So what you're saying, Rico, is like, if I gave $10 to my buddy Rob on a new business, I could be an angel investor.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably a little more than $10.
A little bit.
you know,
Yeah, I probably a lot more than ten
yeah,
bucks.
a
But
lot more than
but I
than
got you.
yeah. But I think it's, but to that point, I think angel investing is something that we need more people of color to be a part of,
It is.
and in terms of to be able to support the companies that we want to support, and I think it's a great entryway to investing and and the startup ecosystem, and to see what you like about it, because
Right.
it could be that you invest, and then you start talking to the founder and be like, hey, I think I could help you, or I think I could be a value add in this area, or I know someone in my network who could help you, so I think it's a great way to kind of look at the ecosystem, and to see where you want to participate, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I think we've covered a lot of ground
Yeah.
today, and I think it's your story, which is when we spoke earlier, um really inspired me, and that's why I
Yeah.
wanted to talk to you so much today. you know eh, Getting to hear in detail, and getting to talk to you like this, hear about how you were brought up, where you went to school, your views on education and your career, to where you are today. That
Mhm.
story, like, it makes so much sense. You can really connect the dots to see how your
Mhm.
experiences have led you down this path, of being someone who saw the need, being a person of color, growing up
Mhm.
the way you did, kind of being maybe the lone representative in a lot of the schools or the industries that you broke into, and now turning around and saying, like, I can do this, help do the same for others. Like,
Mhm.
I can help other people of color, people of diverse backgrounds to rise in their lives and in their careers. The same way that you were able to get these opportunities yourself in your own life. So I really respect what you're doing, what FounderTribes is doing. I wish you a lot of success in your angel investing there.
Thank you.
I guess as we kind of conclude here, are there any parting words or messages you want to drop?
Yeah. There's still a great need for diversity, both on the investor side of the startup ecosystem and in terms of um, and in terms of supporting diverse founders. And I think that's something that shouldn't be lost in as we look at the startup ecosystem and whatever success that Founder Tribes will have is that there are a lot of companies founded by diverse, um, you know, led by diverse founders that I think people should take a look at and 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 be open to looking at a company that's led by someone who doesn't look like you, who isn't the same race or gender as you, who doesn't, right, and they don't live in New York or Boston or Silicon Valley, but they have a really interesting idea. And so looking beyond certain, geographic um, places and taking a look at these companies and diversity and I would love for the startup ecosystem to continue to become more diverse, you know, both as investors and as founders. And that's something that we should keep highlighting, that diversity matters when it comes, particularly in the startup ecosystem. And it's good for business. It sounds very cliche, but it's good, it's good for
It is.
business.
Wonderful. It's a beautiful message. Well, Rico, thank you so much for taking time this morning to talk to me.
Well, thank you for
Um,
having me.
it's been a lot of fun. This is a great conversation. I'm definitely
Thank
going to
you.
want to, we definitely have to do this again. This is an
Yeah, for
awesome
sure.
conversation.
For
Um,
sure.
Again, thanks everyone for listening. This is Bryant Wang and Rico Roberts on the Big Dreams podcast. Take care. Have a great day. Stay safe.
Thanks again, Ryan.
Bye.
Bye.